how to install a ventilation system inside a grow tent. Let's get into it. I've got 3 grow tents here. You can see I have a 2 foot by 4 foot grow tent here. I have a 4 foot by 4 foot grow tent, and this is a 4 foot by 8 foot grow tent. So I need ventilation in each one of these tents. Ventilation simply consists of an inline fan. Here's one right here. This one's taken apart. Ducting, and then a carbon filter. So we're going to install those things here. We'll also install clip-on fans. I have a few clip-on fans I could put in this tent, few in that tent, few in that tent. So we'll do the ventilation system, which is going to help with air exchange, and we will do the clip-on fans, which is going to help with air circulation. And we'll also do the controllers. So we've got controllers here, controller 69 by AC Infinity. Actually, nearly all of the products you see in this video are from AC Infinity. Big shout out to them. They are a sponsor of the channel. You can use discount code MrGrowth15 to save on any of their gardening products. I already did assembly videos for these grow tents, so if you want to see me assemble any of these grow tents, I'll leave a link to those videos down in the YouTube description section below. Now let's get into ventilation. So there are a couple different size ventilation systems that you can get. Inline fan right here. This is a 4-inch system, which is pretty suitable for a 2 foot by 4 foot grow tent. That's usually what I run. Some people put a 6-inch system in here. That'll work just fine. Others would say it's an overkill. So I do the 4-inch in a 2x4. I'll do a 6-inch in a 4x4. And you can see I have that right down there. Got the inline fans, some ducting, and there are the clip-on fans, which we will install after that. And then for the 4 foot by 8 foot grow tent, I'm going to put a 6-inch system in there as well. Some people would opt for an 8-inch system instead. 8-inch would work great. You know, one of these things with the larger grow spaces, once you have multiple lights in here and they're running, and it can generate a lot of heat, and that heat can build up. And once the heat builds up, with the controller that we're going to install here on the side of the grow tent, it'll link up to that and it'll allow the ventilation system to automatically kick on once the heat reaches a certain temperature. So it'll exhaust some of that hot air out of the grow space. Now, some people would want an 8-inch system in here in order to get rid of that hot air at a faster rate. But in my experience, a 6-inch has been just fine. So I went with a 6-inch for this tent. So kind of taking a step back and figuring out, where do I start? Well, we know that these grow tents are going to need an intake and an exhaust. So an intake, somewhere where fresh air can come in. These rectangle intake vents are perfect for that. You can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4 in this 4x8 grow tent. What I'll do is I will basically remove the covering of the rectangle intake vent. 1 or 2 of them typically is what I remove. And then that will allow air to come in through that way. And then as far as exhaust, usually I'll go at the top of the grow tent. Now this particular grow tent, the 4x8, has a ventilation sock up here on the left side. It also has one up here on the right side. So I need to make a decision, which one do I want to vent out of? For the 4x4, this one actually only has 1. I'm kind of forced to go out this way. And then for the 2x4, this one also only has 1, which is on the right side. So I'll be forced to go out of that one. Now, back in the day, I used to go with the side ones. So these side ones, and some people still go with the side ones to this day, but it was very valuable for when you're running an HID grow light air-cooled system, to where you basically have the grow light here in the center. Then you run the ducting from one side to the grow light, actually attaches to the grow light. Other side attaches the grow light out the other way. So you're basically bringing fresh air in through the grow light and then out immediately in order to eliminate the heat from even coming into the grow tent. Those HID grow lights do heat up the space very quickly. So having an air-cooled system was beneficial back in the day. But these days, LED grow lights are what most people are using, I'd say. And so running the ventilation out the top, it can actually save you a little bit of space, because you won't have the ducting coming down to the side there. Okay, so where do we put this ventilation system? Well, there's a couple different ways that we can do it, right? So taking this 4 foot by 4 foot tent, for example, oftentimes what many folks will do is they will actually attach the ventilation to that grow tent pole. Then they have the carbon filter on one side and then the ducting on the other going out. So we could actually install it right there, or we can actually install it on this side as well. There's enough space to where I can have the carbon filter, then the intake fan, then the ducting going out. Now, I'm actually not going to be running a carbon filter in this grow tent. I don't really need to hide the smell. Carbon filter is actually optional. So it'll just be the inline fan to the duct out of the room. And let's talk about going out the room actually. So I need to vent out of the room entirely. Now the room I'm in right now is actually a 13 foot by 13 foot room, 10 feet tall. This is what many refer to as a lung room. Basically the air coming in through the intake vents is coming from this lung room, and we want the hot air that's being exhausted from these grow tents to leave the room completely. The reason why is because if we just have the air exhausting out of the grow tent into this room, well, this room will heat up pretty quickly here, and then temperatures will be too high and the plants won't be happy. So venting out of the room entirely is ideal. Now I thought about actually having the ventilation come straight up, cutting a hole in the ceiling, and then that actually goes directly into my attic. I've done that in my last grow. I had both my 6-inch and 4-inch ventilation going up into the attic, and then there was ventilation in the attic. So I was thinking about actually just running straight shot up into the attic here as well. I would do that for the 6-inch, and I would also do that for the 4-inch, just go directly up into the ceiling. But I don't want to actually do damage to the ceiling there. So looking for other alternatives, we've got a window right here. So many folks will actually exhaust out of the window, which is what I'm going to do. I'll have the ducting run from the grow tents into this splitter and then into this window duct kit here. So both of the 6-inch ventilation systems will feed to there and then out the window. But what about the 4-inch ventilation system on the 2x4 grow tent? Well, I haven't quite figured that out yet. I think I'm gonna have to buy another splitter or some sort of 3-way, which I will be able to connect all 3 tents to that window duct kit. So I will figure that part out in the future, but I can still do most of the install today. I'll still be able to install both the ventilation system as well as the clip fans on all 3 of these tents. And then I'll figure out this tent, how I'm gonna exhaust it out of this room at a later date. So going back to placement for the ventilation system in the 4x4 grow tent, talked about a couple different ways that I could potentially do it. Now, if I am going to do either one of those routes of the inline fan here, for example, then there will be a 90-degree bend of the ducting, and then there's actually going to be another bend that comes over this way towards the window, right? And same thing if I were to install it on this side, there would be a 90-degree bend this way, and then another bend coming back towards the window. Now, generally speaking, it is best to have the least amount of bends as possible in your ventilation system. If you have a ton of different bends, it can inhibit the airflow. And also having the duct as short as possible to the point of exhaust out of the room. So I need to keep that in mind as I am doing this install. Now on the 4x8 grow tent, like I mentioned before, I actually have 2 ventilation socks, 1 on each side. So I probably want to install this ventilation system on the left side here. Why? Well, because once I get out of the grow tent, it's going to be a shorter distance to the window. And I can do the placement of the inline fan similar to how I explained it in the 4x4. I could have it right here with the carbon filter here, for example, and then the ducting come 90 degrees up and then over towards the window. Or I could place it on this side here with the carbon filter, inline fan, and then 90 degrees up and then over. So that's what I think a lot of people would go that route. Now, kind of thinking outside of the box, or thinking outside of the grow tent, one of the things I've done in past grow spaces is actually attach the inline fan outside of the grow tent. So for example, if I were to just have ducting come from here, actually just to reiterate, I'm not going to be running a carbon filter in this tent or this tent. Again, I don't need to hide the smell. Carbon filter is optional. So I'm just running ducting to an inline fan and then out the window. So having that in mind, I actually have the ducting come from here, just be placed into that ventilation sock, mount the inline fan against the wall there, and then have the ducting go from there, of course, to the window. Same thing on the 4x4. Have ducting come out of the ventilation sock back there, and it'll come up to the intake fan, which is gonna be mounted on the wall, and then to the window. So there's some pros to this and some cons. One thing I can think of right off the bat for a pro would be that I'm eliminating that 90-degree bend, right? We talked about if I put an intake fan here, there would be that 90-degree bend. Well, I'm completely eliminating that bend. Sure, there's gonna be a little bit of a bend coming from the ventilation sock there to the inline fan, and a little bit more of a bend going to the window, but I eliminate that 90-degree bend that would be within the grow tent. Now, some people are going to say that's a marginal thing. You're not really going to get much of a difference installing it inside of the grow tent versus outside of the grow tent. Okay, fine, that's debatable. But there is another pro to having the inline fan outside of the grow tent as well, which is bring my lights up more. There's no wasted space. If I had the inline fan up here, well then I can only bring my grow lights up to a certain amount. I couldn't bring it up even more. So I'm saving a little bit of space there, having the inline fan outside of the grow tent. Now one of the downsides is it's going to be a little bit noisier outside of the grow tent, because once that inline fan kicks on, well, there is some noise. Now I'm not too worried about the noise, but if I were to have it inside of the grow tent instead, with the grow tent closed, it does make things a little bit more quiet. And now for the 2 foot by 4 foot grow tent. This one I am going to install within the grow tent. And for demonstration purposes, I will have a carbon filter here as well. So I'll do the carbon filter to inline fan and then out the ventilation sock with more ducting. Another thing I'm going to have to keep in mind and plan for is power. The inline fan does need to be plugged into an outlet so it can run. Also, the lighting is going to need to be plugged into outlets, so I'm going to need to consider that. Lighting install is going to be within the next video on this grow series, so stay tuned for that. But taking power into consideration, knowing where the outlets are. So I actually have an outlet behind the tent right there. I have an outlet behind the tent there. I have an outlet behind the tent. I believe it's right over there. And then there's actually no power outlets on this side. So really I'm stuck with this tent to be right there. And then for the 4x4 right there. And then for the 2x4 right there. For the 4x8 grow tent, there is actually a power outlet right over there, but it's a little bit of a distance to there. Maybe running a power strip would be sufficient, and I might actually go that route depending on how long the cord is on the grow lights, but we'll figure that one out as we get to lighting. All right, so enough talk, let's get into the install. So the inline fan and ducting has been successfully hooked up to the 4 foot by 8 foot grow tent. Got it hooked with the strapping, then we've got the clamp here. Duct feeds up. And then from the top of the tent, it'll go to the window. Same thing with the 4x4. Got the inline fan hooked up and fed up through. And that will come to the window as well. For the 2x4, I've got the inline fan up, but I actually misplaced the clamp. Got the ducting here, but I misplaced the clamp. I don't know where the clamp is. It'll show up. Things are kind of a mess right now. So I'm going to hold off on that, but I would run it the same way. Put the clamp there to the duct. Feed it up, and then it will eventually go out the window. Next thing to do is hook up the window duct kit here. Those will get put into the window splitter, and then my 2 6-inch ducting will get fed to those, and then we'll go out the window. So I will install that right here, and yeah, let's see how it looks. Okay, the window duct kit is installed. As you can see, I actually had to take off of the shades in order to do that, but that's okay. What I'm going to do is actually get some poly film, and I will cover this entirely so there'll be no light coming into the room at all. But yeah, pretty straightforward to how this all connects. I still need to figure out how I am going to connect the 4-inch duct to the window, but I'm sure I'll figure that out soon. Next up, let's install the carbon filter. So we have a 4-inch carbon filter that we will connect to the 4-inch inline fan. It'll be over on this part of the tent. So some people actually connect it directly to the inline fan. Others will have a short piece of duct to connect the two. Hopefully this thing comes with clamps. If it doesn't, then we're not going to be able to install it, because I still haven't found the clamp that was connected to this, but I don't know what happened to it. It was connected to this, which was going to connect to this, which was then going to be fed out of the grow tent. Inside the box, we have the instruction manual. You can see the carbon filter here, 4-inch diameter, and then the carbon filter sock or pre-filter. Okay, I found the 4-inch clamps, and of course I found them after I recorded the whole video, so I'm editing this part in. Let's get the ducting and the carbon filter hooked up. Okay, I got the 4-inch duct connected to the inline fan. See the clamp here, and it just runs up, out the ventilation sock, and I've closed off the sock. One thing I didn't mention about the inline fan is that on each of the fans, not sure how well you can see it, but there's an arrow. This is showing the airflow direction. So when the fan is on, air is going out this way, and so you definitely want to keep that in mind, because the last thing you'd want is to install it the wrong direction. Now that I have that part installed, I'm going to install a carbon filter on this side. I put the pre-filter on the carbon filter and use some more strapping in order to just hang it up on the side of the tent there. Haven't connected it yet. The way I am going to do it is I actually am going to slide it right in there, just like this. But instead of using a clamp like I used on the ducting side of things, I'm going to use duct tape as well. It's like a foil tape that actually connect the two together. Then after I connect those two together, I'll tighten these straps and then tuck them back. Here's what it looks like when it is all connected. So I've tightened the straps. I actually moved it over to the side as much as possible. The reason why is because I don't want to inhibit the airflow. These are all the pores here. Underneath this sock, there's a bunch of pores, and that's where the air comes in through. On the outer edge here, we've got a little bit of space here where it's not the pores. So having the strapping over that instead of the pores will prevent airflow from being inhibited. So the straps are tightened and they are tucked back. Got the duct tape connecting the two. Inline fan, clamp, more duct going out of the tent. So this ventilation system is good to go, minus the fact that I still need to figure out how to connect this duct to the window, like I spoke about earlier. Another thing to mention is that the inline fans, I did run the power cord through and it is now going to be connected to the power strip right there. So I end up plugging the power strip into the outlet that's right behind the grow tent back there. So the power strip runs in between, and then I'll be able to power some of the equipment on both of the tents. Now I'm not going to put all the equipment in there because we have yet to put the lighting in there. I'll probably have some of the lights connected to that one, and then I'll do another power strip over here coming from this outlet. I'll have a power strip up, maybe mounted up to the wall or something like that, and then any lighting or equipment from this side of the grow tent would go to that power strip. It's going to help prevent too much electricity going to one circuit, so spreading out the electricity load. Next up, let's install the controller. See, I've got them on the ground right here. They were installed before, so your grow tent is going to come with this. And all this really does, you can see kind of the notches there. There's 4 of them, 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom. It just slides up into the notches here. Just like that. Can be a little tricky to take on and off. And I've already put a couple of screws in there where they should go. In order for it to actually be connected to these back notches here, they just kind of slide it on there. And it rests just like that. I've already connected the controller to this plate. Just going to slide this one on as well. Alright, then I need to attach the cable that is on the inline fan. USB-C. We'll run this cable up on top of the grow tent. There's actually this little flap right here, which you can slide the cable up in here, and it will prevent you from having to basically send it through one of these ventilation socks, for example. So we'll be able to slide it up into here. It'll come out here, and then we'll be able to plug it right in. Okay, I poked the cable through the grow tent, and now I'm going to remove the controller. So you can see that there's 4 different outlets that you can put into. You can actually put it in any one of these outlets, and then you'll see it once we actually get into the programming of it, or really get into the app to set things up. You'll be able to clearly see which one is your ventilation. In the 2x4 tent, the 4-inch inline fan that I have, one thing I wanted to point out is that there's actually an adapter here that I had to use because I have an older model of the inline fans. So FYI, if you do have an older model of their inline fan, you can get an adapter for it, and then that will plug right into their UIS system. Okay, plugged in the first cable into the controller. You can see how I ran the wires here, just tried to make it as clean as possible. And I used some of the AC Infinity little cable management ties here, so it's pretty cool that the grow tents come with it. But I put that one like this. On the 2x4, you can see I ran it up and above, similar way. Plugged it aside, and then again, poking it through the bottom there, connecting to the controller. One thing to mention is that the 4-inch version that I have has a cable that's long enough, and then again, the adapter, which goes to controller. This model, I think I have all different models. This model has a cable that's connected here that's long enough to come to the controller. This fan right here, I'm not sure which generation these ones are, but this one you actually have to connect. It basically comes with a UIS to UIS extended cord. So I'll connect that here and then run it up over into the controller that's going to be placed right here. So I put the plate there. Another thing I wanted to point out was that the newer model here looks a little bit different here. It's kind of pointed. The other one was square, as you saw before. So it makes it a little bit easier to kind of click on there. And then this controller seems to be magnetic. So it actually kind of goes right to it and kind of follows its way into place pretty easily there. So I'm going to run this last cable now. the UIS to UIS extension. I'll run it now and then we'll go from there. Got the last one plugged in, and this is how I ran the cable. Just up top, clipped it to the side right there, bed it in. And one thing I noticed about these new tents as well is there's Velcro. There's actually a piece of Velcro here that there isn't on the other tents. It's another thing that they did in order to help prevent light from escaping. Installing the probe here, which can capture the temperature and humidity, is next. And this just plugs into the back of the controller with this plug here. So I'll do that right now. Okay, I have the probe hanging in the center there. You can see I just had it poking through, up, and then have it coming down. I like to hang it at canopy level. Once I have plants in here, I'll be able to adjust it pretty easily. And then for the 4x4, let's check that out. So same deal, poked it up, kind of ran along the pole there, and then dropped it down into the center. Well, pretty much the center. And then I'll adjust that once I have plants in there. And then for the 2x4, same deal, poked it down, kind of ran it up, and coming down into the center. Okay, so the next thing to do would be to plug in the inline fans and then actually turn on the power to the controllers, and then we'll be able to actually adjust the settings a little bit. So let's do that. Okay, power is on. You can see that all of the controllers now have a power connected to them. A couple of these controllers were set up in a different grow room, so those settings have saved, I believe, but this one in particular is brand new. So we're gonna start from scratch on this one. Now there are two ways to go about configuring this. First one will be to configure it here through the panel on the actual controller. The second way to go about it would be to do it through their app, which in my opinion is a lot easier. So that's what I'm gonna do. We're gonna go into the app right now and we will adjust some of these settings. Okay, so when I go into the app, this is what I see. I have two of the controllers already on here. However, they're not connecting automatically, and I think it's because there's a new Wi-Fi. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start fresh for you guys. So let's delete these out, and now let's start fresh. Just up in the corner here, you press the plus button. We are going to do the smart controller. Controller 69 Pro is what I have. Hold the port button for 5 seconds, then wait for the Bluetooth icon to start flashing. Okay, there is the Bluetooth button right there. It is flashing. Now we'll come back here and press next. It is going to search for it, found it, connect to Wi-Fi. It has connected. So first thing, it looks like it needs to update firmware, so we'll do that. Success, press done. So I'll show you a couple different things you can do under the settings here. I'm just going to rename this. We'll name this 4x8. You can do the temperature display, Fahrenheit or Celsius, device brightness. There's lots of different things that you can do in here. We'll confirm that. We're going to go to port 1, which you can see that symbol right there means that it's the ventilation. And I'm going to change this from off. There's several different things that you can set it to. I like to do auto, and I like to set it if the temperature gets too high, it'll kick on. So I like if the temperature actually reaches about 82, then I want it to kick on. So we got that. And then I want it also if the humidity is too high. With the humidity, right now I'm just going to set it to about 70. Might change this later on, but just having a few automatic settings in there. So that's all I'm going to show you for right now. There are several other settings that you can go through. You can go through VPD. For example, a lot of people do the VPD setting. Some people like to just keep it on. Some people put it on a schedule. And so there are many, many ways to go about this. There's actually a few videos which I will link you to that will give you a step-by-step walkthrough of setting up the controller. One of them is by Rob from CLTV. And the other one I'm going to recommend is by Aaron from Happy Hydro. I'll link both of those videos down in the YouTube description section below, so that way you can learn more about these settings. Okay, I got all three of them added in now, and I actually want to put the 4x8 to the bottom, so let's click and drag, and it is on at the bottom. I've set them all to the same thing, so the fan will turn on when the temperature reaches 82 degrees Fahrenheit. When it's below that, obviously, the fan will be off. Then it will also turn on if the relative humidity reaches 70% or above. And then of course the fan will not be on when it's below that. Okay, next up, let's get into air circulation. So I have a bunch of these CloudRay S6 Gen 2 clip-on fans, and I will open up the box, show you how to put them together, and then we'll get them put in the grow tents. This is all that comes in the box. So the fan, of course, this piece, which is the clip-on part, we are going to connect that to the fan. I'll show you how to do that in a second. We got some cable management, and then we have a UIS to UIS extension. So putting this together is pretty straightforward. Basically, just unravel this entirely, pull it all the way out. Then we are going to slide the fan in. Make sure the clip side is this way. You want to clip onto a grow tent and then have the fan pointing the other way. Let's slide this in here. All right, and then we just replace this. Tighten it all together, and now we are good to go. Okay, so I hooked up the oscillating fans in each of the grow tents. Let me show you what I did here. So just place them right there for now. I will adjust the height and the angle once I have plants in the grow tent. But I have 2 on this side of the grow tent. Look in here, I've got 2 on this side of the grow tent as well. Fed both of the power cords out through that bottom ventilation sock. I did that on both sides there. Over on the 4x4, I have 1 on this side and then 1 on this side. Again, feeding them down on the bottom ventilation sock. That's where the power cord went through. And then on the 2x4, these are actually generation 1 fans. I had 2 left over, put 1 here and then 1 on this side. And then both again are fed down through the ventilation sock. Let's take a look at the back of the Gen 1 fan, comparing it to the Gen 2 fan real quick. So let me take this off here. All right, here's the Gen 1. The buttons for this are on the back of the actual fan. Basically, you hit this and it will start to... There's the oscillating feature. We'll turn that off for now so this won't be moving. But I do have the fan on. It's just obviously blowing towards the ground right now. It's on speed 1. There's 10 different speeds. And that light does automatically turn off like you just saw. So it's on speed 1 right now. Increase it up. There's 10 different speeds. And I don't know if you can hear that, but that's cranking. And see the light has turned off now. And I would just press the rotate button when I want it to rotate. Once I press it again, it is going to turn the fan off completely. And then here's the spot for the UIS. So that's one thing I didn't do is hook up the UIS. You plug it in here and then to your actual controller. And then you'll be able to control it from your app if you want. I don't typically do that because the back of the controller, the one I have, only has 4 spots on it. So I usually have that for my lighting, for my inline fan, and for my humidifier. I guess I would leave 1 spot for a oscillating fan, which, I probably will do that. So that is the first generation fan. Let's take a look at the second generation now. Here is the second generation fan, and you can see that they no longer have the controls on the back of the fan that's moving. They changed it to down here, which is pretty cool. So again, press this button. It's going to show you what level it's on. There's also this other feature right here, which is like a wind feature, which will gradually go up and down to kind of simulate the natural wind more. But I personally just keep it on one of the speeds that I feel is going to be best for the plants, depending on the stage that they're in, how much air circulation I'll need in the tent. And then this is the oscillating buttons. That's another thing that's changed from the Generation 1 to Generation 2 is it'll actually have oscillating how fast it oscillates. So it goes up to 10 different oscillating speeds, and then you can of course turn it off. And then it does have this dial on the side here, which is going to show you what degrees you have it angled at. And this one actually has a new motor as well, so should give a longer lifespan. And yeah, pretty straightforward. That's all that really needs to be said about these oscillating fans. Another thing I want to go over is opening the rectangle intake vents. So I mentioned earlier in this video that I was going to circle back to that. Now that I have the inline fans installed, I have an idea of which ones I should open. Now some can say this is a subjective thing, but the way I like to do it is knowing that my exhaust is up on this side of the tent, I'm gonna have the rectangle vents opened that is diagonal. So on this side of the tent, I'll open this one, and I might open this one as well, I'm not really sure, but I'll start off with this one, see how things are going, and then we'll go from there. But this is gonna allow the airflow to really kind of come across the whole tent, right? So if I just had this one open, for example, air could potentially just go up and get sucked right out, right? So it could just be flow. However, if I have the opposite side open, well, the air is going to be able to come up and really be able to circle around a little bit better. Now I know I have oscillating fans in here, so air circulation shouldn't really be too much of a problem, but I personally like to have the rectangle vents open that are diagonal to the inline fan. And you see, I'm going to do the same thing here on the 4x4. So this corner right here is where the air is being sucked out of. So diagonal that, I'm going to open up this rectangle intake vent. And the 2x4, air is really going to be pulled from here. So diagonal to this position is going to be that rectangle intake vent. which I'll have open. And opening these is pretty easy. Some pull completely off, others you basically just kind of flip it up. Difficult to do with one hand. You just roll it up like that. That's the way I like to do it. And yeah, other models, like I believe this one right here, the 4x4, is actually, it completely comes off. It's off right now. I actually have the flap here. I usually just keep this above the tent in case I ever want to put it back on. So we are almost finished now. Next thing we need to do is lighting. So I gotta install lighting in each one of these tents. That's gonna be in the next video in this Grow series. What I'm gonna do is actually link that right up in the corner there. Click that video, that'll get you to lighting. Thank you all so much for watching. Links in the description section below, and I'll catch you in the next video.